It began, as so many things do, with a funeral. Marcus Silva stood stiff and sober in his charcoal suit, watching the glossy mahogany casket disappear into the maw of the earth. His mother's casket. Around him the mourners sniffled and shuffled, a rustling thicket of black hats and lace veils doing little to muffle their whispers. Poor boy, all alone in the world now. Do you think he arranged a good service? She was very particular, Rosalind. Such a tragedy, a mother dying so young. He's what, 25? 24. Not even finished with his doctorate yet. Marcus ignored their speculative muttering. He ignored the cloying sweetness of the funeral lilies, the drone of the priest's platitudes, the scuff of his new dress shoes against the damp grass. He stared unblinking at the hole swallowing the last of his family, feeling nothing but a vague irritation at this tedious social convention. His mother was dead. Pomp and circumstance wouldn't change that. The one thing that penetrated Marcus's feigned indifference was the fist of earth thudding hollow against the casket lid. Such a final sound. Even he couldn't suppress a flinch at it. The finality, he told himself. Not the loss. Never that. As the funeral goers began to disperse, Marcus's advisor, Professor Embry, laid a warped hand on his shoulder. My boy, I'm so dreadfully sorry for your loss. I know how devoted you were to your mother. Thank you, sir. Marcus inclined his head respectfully. I appreciate your condolences, but I assure you, I will not let this interfere with the progress of my research. Professor Embry's liver-spotted brow furrowed. Marcus, a loss like this, it is normal and necessary to grieve, to experience disruptions. The old man's rheumy eyes grew urgent. Don't neglect your humanity in the pursuit of knowledge. Science cannot fill the hole left by love. I'll be fine, Professor. Marcus shrugged off Embry's hand. Not all of us need to be coddled through the realities of life and death. My mother would want me to carry on. If you'll excuse me. As he strode away through the weathered headstones, Marcus buried his hands in his pockets, fingering the crumpled scrap of paper there. His mother's last letter to him, her spidery handwriting nearly illegible with pain and sedation. He didn't need to take it out to recall the words. They were etched into his brain, a literal scar of ink and agony. My dearest Marcus, I am so very proud of the brilliant man you've become. I know losing your father and now me has not been easy, but your strength astounds me daily. You will do marvelous, important things. I'm sorry I will not be there to see it. My last thoughts will be of you, your first steps, your gap-toothed grin, the way you always pestered me to explain how the world works. I love you bigger than the sky. Wherever I am, that love remains. You carry it with you. Be true to your beautiful mind and your beautiful heart. My darling boy, shine bright. I will be watching. All my love always, Mama. Angrily, Marcus shoved the letter deeper into his pocket. Empty words. If her love remained, why did he feel nothing but this gnawing void? This cold blankness where his chest used to be? In a way, her sickness had been a relief. The perfect excuse to sequester himself in his basement laboratory, to pour every ounce of his frenetic intellect into his research. He could solve death, unravel the tangled threads of what animates flesh and what snuffs it out. If he could crack that code, he would never have to feel this way again, this scooped-out hollow that made a mockery of her promise. You said you would be watching, he snarled under his breath. So watch this, Mama. Watch me conquer the unconquerable. You will be my first test subject. For months, Marcus disappeared into his studies, emerging from his laboratory only for the occasional lecture or faculty meeting. He grew gaunt and unkempt, his skin sallow from lack of sun, eyes blazing fever bright above purple smudged sockets. You're working yourself into the grave, my boy, Professor Embry warned. I know you miss her terribly, but this is no way to honor her memory. Marcus bared his teeth in a mirthless rictus. On the contrary, Professor, it is the only way. Let the old man think him mad with grief. He was mad only in the sense of purpose, frenetic in his pursuit of the impossible. Late one night, as the clock tower struck 2, Marcus sat hunched over his workbench, annotating a formula with shaking hands. The lantern wick guttered, throwing monstrous shadows against the stone walls. Around him strange contraptions whirred and bubbled, coils of wires and jars of viscous fluid reflecting the sickly green light. Subjects' leukocytes show resistance to viral necrosis, he muttered, voice rusty from disuse. The reanimated tissue remains stable for several hours before deterioration begins. A sudden crash of thunder made the glassware jump and shiver. The storm outside battered the high windows, rain lashing the panes like ghostly fingernails demanding entry. Marcus ignored nature's tantrum, lost in the fevered scrawl of his notes. He was close, so damnably close he could nearly taste the copper tang of triumph in his mouth. Just a few more adjustments to the serum, to the delivery mechanism. Frantically he flipped through his reference tome, searching for that elusive piece to complete the puzzle. There, in the cramped marginalia, an annotation that made his breath catch. With trembling fingers, he turned to the indicated page. Use of a massive electrical discharge in initial stage of reanimation may overcome the cellular resistance. He read aloud. Lightning, of course. What else could jolt inert flesh back to glorious seething life? He had been a fool to discount it before, too cautious, too linear in his thinking. No more. He would harness the storm, siphon its power into his electrodes, bathe the cadaver in galvanic currents until it had no choice but to obey his command, obey his love. For Marcus did love his mother still, in his stunted, obsessive way. It was this love that drove him relentlessly forward, that blinkered him to all considerations but the work. The work would be his love made tangible, writ in lightning and grave dirt and the blood of his own racing heart. He would remake her, call her back to his side, and in this unmaking of death he would at last understand what it meant to love. The ache in his chest would dissolve in the crackle of lightning, the radiance of her resurrection. Seized by a manic new energy, Marcus began to assemble the final elements of his experiment. Electrodes, scalpels, a sloshing vial of luminous serum that promised reanimation. The slab waited, ominous with its new purpose. Another earth-shaking boom of thunder, so loud it seemed to crack the world in two. Marcus laughed wildly, raising his arms as if to embrace the storm. "Watch, Mama," he cried. "Watch me refute death itself for love of you." On the next heretic flash of lightning, he was out the door, long legs churning up the muddy cemetery path. The rain lashed his face, the wind tore at his hair, but Marcus barely felt them. All he could feel was the pounding of his pulse, the electric thrill racing through his veins, the delirious pull of the impossible finally within his grasp. At the crest of the hill, he fell to his knees in the sucking ooze before a stark headstone. Rosalind Silva, beloved wife and mother. The newly turned earth still scarred the grass before it. Marcus scrabbled at the soil, fingernails cracking, breath coming in harsh sobs. He would have her back. Once more her cool hand on his cheek, her low lullaby in his ear. The world could not be so cruel as to rip that from him, to insist it was forever lost. He would not permit it. Time lost all meaning as he dug, rain and filth splashing up into his face, blinding him. He tore away grass and rock, roots and wriggling worms, penetrating deeper into the wounded earth. Somewhere above the lightning split the sky again and again, each bolt searing his shadow stark against the roiling ground. At last metal scraped against wood with a sound like all his teeth being ripped from his gums. The coffin. Reverent now, Marcus swept the remaining dirt from its surface, caressing the curves and planes. With a grunt, he hefted it up onto his shoulder, staggering under its weight. The journey back to the laboratory passed in a blur of howling wind and grave soil. Marcus crashed through the door, struggling casket first, letting it thud to the floor. Gently, so gently, he pried open the lid. "Mama," he whispered, "I've come to bring you home." Her face was waxen, fine-boned and beautiful even in death. Marcus stroked a finger along her sunken cheek, the loose folds of skin gray and sagging. He would make her flush again with life, with vim and vigor. Carefully, almost clinically, he transferred the body to the slab, arranging the stiff limbs with utmost precision. The electrodes he placed at temple and throat, sternum and groin, a perverted echo of the passion he'd never known. "Soon, Mama," he crooned. "Soon you'll dance again, eyes bright, cheeks pink. You'll smile at me and call me your brilliant boy, just like before." The serum roiled in its beaker, sickly luminescent. Marcus filled a syringe with it, flicking out any air bubbles, the needle hovering over her breastbone. He looked out the window at the raging tempest, watched a bolt of lightning claw its way across the livid sky. Now, it must be now. Plunger depressed, serum oozing into desiccated veins. The battery hummed like a hive of ravenous wasps, building its charge. Marcus poised one trembling hand on the toggle switch, the other on the copper rod leading out into the screaming night. "For you, Mama," his voice cracked. "Only for you." Lightning arced across the sky once more, blinding, ravenous. The instant it earthed itself in the lightning rod, Marcus flipped the switch. Blue-white fire seized the body, arching it grotesquely off the slab. The straps strained as it bucked and spasmed, mouth stretched impossibly wide around a silent scream. Ozone and charred meat choked the air. Marcus stared wild-eyed, panting. "Live," he demanded. "Live, damn you!" The crackling energy dissipated as quickly as it struck. Rosalind's body fell limp, wisps of smoke curling from its fingertips. Marcus held his breath, awaiting any flicker of life. A finger twitched, an eyelid fluttered. Then, horribly, a rattling gasp shook the ravaged form. Clouded eyes snapped open, fixing on Marcus with a terrible blankness. "It's me, Mama. It's Marcus. Your boy." He reached to cup her face with shaking hands. Those dead eyes held no recognition, no love, only a yawning, insatiable hunger. The thing that had been Rosalind Silva opened its gaping maw and lunged for him with snapping teeth and grasping claws. Marcus stumbled back, narrowly avoiding the bite. The creature strained against the straps, growling, driven by an instinct lower than thought. Whatever spark made Rosalind herself was nowhere in those flat, filmed eyes. Revulsion and a wrenching grief warred in Marcus's chest. He had gambled everything on this profane ritual, his reputation, his sanity, his soul itself. And for what? This grotesque shell, this vicious revenant. An abomination wearing his mother's beloved face. "What have I done?" he whispered. "God forgive me, what have I done?" There comes a moment when even the most deluded must confront the stark truth of their folly. As Marcus beheld the writhing thing he had made, that cold realization settled over him like a shroud. No feat of science, no frenzy of intellect, could reclaim what death had stolen, could requite the loss that gaped within him, the unquiet grave of his unmet need for love. He knew then the limits of the human heart, the hubris of believing oneself immune to love's demands and its inevitable wounds. In his arrogance, he had profaned the only love he had ever known, the only heart that had ever beat for him alone.
"I'm sorry, Mama."
Great shuddering sobs racked his thin frame. "I'm sorry I couldn't let you go. I'm sorry I tried to drag you back to my emptiness. You deserved to rest, to be at peace." Gently, Marcus covered the snapping, soulless thing with a sheet. With the last of his strength, he wheeled the gurney through the pelting rain, back to the defiled grave. The creature struggled and snarled, but he did not falter. "Be at peace," he wept as he lowered the body back into the earth. "Please forgive a foolish man who understood too late." Clod after clod fell on the shrine-outed form, until nothing remained but a mound of dark, bleeding earth. Marcus Silva left Gravenham that night, never to return. Some say he took the cowl, devoting his life to the contemplation of mysteries beyond mortal ken. Others whisper he fled to the Far East, seeking wisdom to quiet his ravaged soul. Only one thing is certain: a season of uncanny blight befell the village in the wake of his departure. The crops withered, the wells turned brackish. Wives woke weeping from dreams of babes cold and blue in their arms. And always, the wind keening over the moors bore the echo of a mother's mournful lullaby. For the unquiet grave will have its due, one way or another. The hunger of loss, the ravenous need for love's redemption, must be answered. And the brilliant, broken boy who dared to defy death for love, he would learn the cost of that love in the end. Learn that a heart cannot be commanded back to beating, that not all sundered things can be made whole by the application of will and lightning and need. Some graves, once torn open, will never be filled, some aches never salved. And yet, even as he wandered far and haunted, a small secret part of Marcus rejoiced. For had he not loved, in his way, loved so deeply that he raged against the dying of that light with all the unholy arts at his command? He had been a monster, true, a modern Prometheus, but he had burned so very brightly, and perhaps it is better to burn than to never know the flame at all. As Marcus wandered the windswept moors, the weight of his deeds pressed down on him like a physical thing. He had played God, and in doing so had damned himself. The memory of that grotesque parody of his mother, all snapping jaws and soulless eyes, haunted his every step. In the lonely years that followed, Marcus turned his brilliant mind to the study of the ethereal, the numinous. He pored over ancient tomes of spiritualism and occult lore, seeking understanding, seeking absolution. But always, the specter of the unquiet grave loomed over him. He could feel it like a physical pull, a lodestone in his marrow. It whispered to him in the susurrus of dead leaves, in the mournful cries of night birds. It called him back, inexorable as the tide. And so, on a bleak November eve, Marcus found himself once more at the gates of Gravenham Cemetery. The rusted hinges shrieked like lost souls as he pushed through, dead grass crunching beneath his feet. At the crest of the hill, his mother's headstone leaned drunkenly, strangled in a tangle of dead ivy. Marcus fell to his knees before it, tears coursing down his wasted cheeks. "Mama," he keened, "what have I done to us?" The night wind picked up, sending dried leaves skittering across the broken ground. Marcus hunched his shoulders against its bite, feeling it keen through the tatters of his coat. He was so cold, always so cold now. Suddenly, the leaves stirred in a new pattern, coalescing and whirling up from the earth. They danced around him, brittle fingers caressing his face, tugging at his hair. And then, in the midst of their giddy reel, a figure took shape. Rosalind stood before him, limned in the ghostly light of the moon. Not the grotesque revenant he had created, but his mother as she had been in life, vibrant, warm, achingly familiar. "Marcus," she breathed, and her voice was the rustle of fall leaves, the sigh of wind in bare branches. "Oh, my poor boy, what has your love wrought?" "Mama, I'm so sorry." Marcus choked on a sob. "I couldn't bear to let you go. I thought I could bring you back to me." Rosalind drifted closer, an autumn zephyr, and lay one diaphanous hand on his cheek. "My brilliant, foolish son, love is not a force to be commanded by will and artifice. It is a garden, springing up wild in the heart." She gestured to the weed-choked grave, the untended plot. "You tried to uproot me, to wrench me back to a life I had already passed beyond. But the dead must be allowed their rest, just as the living must root and grow." Slowly, gently, Rosalind took Marcus's hands in her own. They felt like cobwebs and mist, and yet, he would swear he felt the thrum of her pulse in them. "Marcus, you must let me go," she said, and her smile was so tender, so luminous with love, that fresh tears sprang to his eyes. "Let the unquiet grave be still at last. Grieve and then live. Carry my love with you always, but as a balm, not a wound." "I don't know how," Marcus whispered. "I am so empty without you. Oh, my darling, don't you see? That emptiness is where the garden can grow. Turn your face to the sun. Let your love take root and blossom." She squeezed his hands in her spectral ones. "Be the brilliant, beautiful man I know you to be. I will always be watching." Marcus bowed his head as great, shuddering sobs racked his frame. And as he wept, as the tears coursed down to water the hungry earth, he felt something ease in his chest. The iron bands around his heart creaked and gave way, letting in the first tender shoots of something green and vital. When he raised his head at last, Rosalind was gone. Only the moonlight and the night wind remained, and the soft sigh of the earth settling back over the grave. But Marcus could swear he smelled the rich loam of new growth, could feel the brush of phantom lips against his brow. "I will, Mama," he vowed to the listening night. "I will live and I will love, for your sake. No more unquiet graves, only gardens. Only the bloom and the fruit of all you gave me." And he left the cemetery for the final time, feet firm for the first time in years. As he passed through the rusted gates, the night wind picked up, swirling the leaves in one last wild dance. "Goodbye, my love," it seemed to whisper. "Goodbye and grow well." In the years that followed, Dr. Marcus Silva became renowned throughout England as a great philanthropist and humanitarian. He established free clinics and schools for the poor, worked tirelessly to ease the suffering of the sick and bereaved. And always, he cultivated lush and verdant gardens, a riotous profusion of bloom and leaf. The village of Gravenham shook off its years of blight, as if waking from a long, troubled dream. The fields flourished, the sickness abated. And each year, on the anniversary of Rosalind Silva's death, the children would find her grave blanketed in a riot of flowers, lilies and orchids, bird of paradise and delphinium. No one knew who left them, but some whispered that, if you visited the grave on a certain night in late October, you would catch the scent of rich earth and green growth. You might hear the rustle of spectral leaves, and the low, loving murmur of a mother's lullaby. And Dr. Silva? He tended his gardens, and he healed the sick, and he taught his own children the value of a love rooted in trust and nurtured in patience. When his time came many decades later, he went gladly into the loam, a smile on his weathered face, for he had learned at long last to grieve and to grow, to let the dead rest and the living flourish. And in his heart bloomed a garden of memory and love, wild and eternal, reaching always for the sun.